The 5 worst films of 2010. Why 5 and not 10? Well, it's very simple. This year was not a great year for movies. Now, if you look at the movies I rated, I gave a lot of very good ratings. And the reason why I say it's a weak year is because there's a lot of movies I didn't see because I knew they'd be bad. You know, I'm not going to dish out $10 to see something like Skyline or see something like Vampires Suck, something I know is going to be terrible. And I'm sure if I saw them, they would be on this list. Films on this list are 5 films that I felt had a lot of potential to be good, but failed miserably. Number 5, A Nightmare on Elm Street. This movie had potential galore. It had solid teen cast. It had Jackie Earle Haley, who was in Watchmen. He was brilliant in Watchmen. This movie really shows what Hollywood has turned into, and it's that the original Nightmare on Elm Street was an original movie that had such a low budget, that had images that were created not because they had, $100 worth of computer-generated effects. It's because it was made by people that really cared. This was a movie made by people who knew that just attaching the name Nightmare on Elm Street on something would make money, and I think that's the biggest problem with, Hollywood in general. And, Michael Bay produced this movie. This is the Platinum Dunes remake. They remade Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They didn't remake Dawn of the Dead, which is, like, the only good horror remake out there, besides The Crazies. The movie has a lot of, issues as far as pacing goes. The acting's not very strong. Dialogue's bad. The character Freddy is uninteresting. The character Freddy should be an incredible character. He should be something like Heath Ledger's Joker, just a psychopath that goes around, that murders people for no real reason. He just likes doing it. And the way that they shot him in this movie was they tried to make you feel sympathy for him. I don't want to feel sympathy for Freddy Krueger. He's Freddy Krueger. It's like feeling sympathy for Hitler. Number 4. This was a movie that had the opportunity to be... This is a movie that's going to make a lot of people mad because a lot of people love this movie. I've seen this movie shown up on top 10 lists, and this is a movie that, being a super villain and superhero type of nerd, I thought I would love. And that would be Despicable Me at my number 4. I just couldn't get into this movie. I don't know what it was. It started out with some strong potential, but to me, the thing about it's an obvious DreamWorks movie because, DreamWorks just throws in a bunch of random pop culture references in their movies. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it works like something like Shrek, because the first Shrek, it worked within the world that it lived in because it was a world of fairy tales. So you didn't have a problem with them referencing fairy tales and stuff like that because that's the world it was in. This is supposed to take place in, not the world that we live in now, but in some sort of strange altered universe, and even in the world that I lived in, I didn't believe it. It just seemed out of place, and I look at something like my number 1 favorite movie of the year. I'm not going to spoil it now, even though most people probably know what it is. That's a movie that appeals to both kids and adults by just being funny and by just having heart. The plot to this movie is a supervillain kidnaps 3 children so he can help them steal the moon. Was this written by a bunch of 5-year-olds? Number 3. It's a movie that was marketed in the ads. It had, I Got a Feeling from Black Eyed Peas playing in the background. I only remember that just because I saw the trailer for this like 30 times in theaters. It had everybody in it, and it was marketing it as some sort of really fun romantic comedy. You're going to come out of it laughing. It's a lot of fun. This movie was one of the most depressing movies ever. There was not one happy relationship in this movie, and the only happy relationship at the beginning turns out to be a lie at the end. Every single thing, every relationship in this movie is either lifeless, boring, or depressing. And look, I don't have a problem with romantic comedies trying to go off formula like that, because 500 Days of Summer, one of the best movies of 2009, was a movie that was like that went off the typical romantic comedy formula, and it was a phenomenal movie. But that movie was fun to watch because it had the great dialogue. I don't know, maybe it's just me, I don't like watching people's relationships disintegrate in front of my eyes. Some people feel that way about war movies, some people feel that way about horror movies. I feel that way about watching, just people's lives being ruined. Because I feel like I'm invading their privacy. That's a problem with this movie, is that there were 25 freaking actors in this movie. All of them, I felt like I was bothering them. They all seemed bored. None of them were having fun. The only two that gave any effort at all were Anne Hathaway and Topher Grace. But they were in the movie they were in the movie for like 5 minutes. Everybody else was boring too. Day and Night with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. Now, Night and Day is a movie that thinks it's better than the audience. It's winking and nodding and saying, "Huh, look how funny we are. Aren't we charming? We have Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz in our movie." It's like, yeah, first of all, Cameron Diaz is a terrible actress. She has not been in a good movie since, like, a good quality film. What Happens in Vegas was funny, but that was not because of her. The last movie that she was in that was any good... Oh, wait. It was, wait. Nothing. She's awful, and guess what? She's terrible in this movie. What a shock! It is incredible that she still has a career. Tom Cruise is 50. Okay, Cameron Diaz is 37. That was something, for some reason, I just couldn't get into. If they would have had some sort of chemistry, I could have bought it. But no, they didn't. It was Cameron Diaz trying to be funny, which, big surprise, she wasn't. Tom Cruise gave it his all. He gave the best performance he possibly could have. It's a fact of the matter is that this movie was so stupid. I can appreciate a stupid film, but this movie was not stupid. This was, I think, somebody said, alright, we have one screenwriter and a room full of goats, and they have 12 minutes to write an idea for a movie. And then all the goats beat up the screenwriter and tried to make the movie themselves. Because this movie has some of the stupidest things in it. And it goes on, the movie's 2 hours, it feels like it's about, 5.5. This is the second straight Cameron Diaz movie I walked out of, where I had my head in my shirt like this, because I didn't want to be the guy who was noticed that saw Night and Day. Awful movie, awful. God. Most years, that would be the worst movie of the year. But no, the movie gods just had to send me just that one extra piece of swill, wrapped up in a bow for me to watch. I have never walked out of a movie. These two people made Gladiator. Gladiator! One of the greatest movies of all times. And they just produced this stool. Amazing, hideous, ugly, boring, just, I feel, look at my face when I'm talking about this movie. I look like I'm gonna be sick. Imagine the scenes in the Phantom Menace, Star Wars Phantom Menace, where they take just the political scenes. The scenes where they're talking about taxation. And instead of having it spread throughout the movie, they make it 2.5 hours long. The little things, like the music was, the editing. Oh my gosh, I couldn't see what was going on half the time. The shaky camera, which is stupid. Every time somebody was fighting, it looked like this. The camera was shaking, like the cameraman had cerebral palsy or something. It was awful, awful, awful. And that's the worst thing about this movie, is that I could go on for days about how boring it is. It's that this movie has 5 amazing actors in it. It has a director that has made some of the best films of all time. And instead of making a Robin Hood movie, they just decide to take their own creative liberties and make the movie that they felt they wanted to make. This is a movie that took a property that we love. It took Robin Hood. People know Robin Hood. People have seen many versions of Robin Hood. And it didn't make a Robin Hood movie. This movie could have been about anything. Had they have not used the name Robin Hood, you would not have known it was Robin Hood. But when you make, a 2.5 hour snooze fest, and it's, once again, felt like it was like 12 hours. And it had the potential to be a classic, a potential to be a type of movie that, in the right hands, could have been great. And for some reason, they gave it to a guy who they knew would make them money, not would make a good film. And that's what qualifies Robin Hood as being the absolute worst movie of the year. Man, I'm burned out.